You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and VERNA Wilson.
Good evening and welcome back into the Ecto Portal. This is Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with
VERNA Wilson,
my co-host. All right, we're holding on here. Oh, Glenn.
Well,
it's
there
like
he is.
as if on cue. Glenn just called. Hold on just a sec. FCC Free Radio, Ecto Portal. This is Tony speaking. Glenn? Hey, Glenn. Good to have you back. Can you hold on just a sec? Cool. Thank you.
So there's our guests. Whoops.
Are you there, Glenn?
Yep, I'm here.
Cool. Thanks for coming back with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So Glenn, we want to go ahead and conclude the second part of the George Adamski story. And when we left off, I believe that we talked about the last part of his trip when they had somebody who was considered a spiritual master come talk to him about the fate of humanity. Mm-hmm. And I believe also they had a little celebration for him on one of the ships right before they concluded their mission.
Yeah.
Right. So what I was going to ask, I know this sounds rather a strange question, but what did they consider? Why did they consider this the last time they were going to see him? Why did they consider this mission fulfilled? Did they say exactly why they came and why they were observing everything so much and what they were hoping they would leave him with?
Well, the interaction is always continuous. It's just at different intervals and at different, shall we say, what's the best word here? Different intensities, depending on time, history, location, circumstances, and things like that. So in George's case, they had given him the information that was necessary in order to do the work that he needed to do. And so, of course, since he's not the only person in the entire cosmos which they interact with and they help, so they go on systematically in doing the work that they believe is in relationship to creative force or basically the support of life. So in his case, although his contacts didn't end, they continued. That particular portion or lesson, just like you would go through university, that particular class, was coming to fruition and it was time to go on to the next step.
Right. Now, you said that his contact didn't end. When I was reading his book, the way he described it made it sound like he was never going to see them again, but apparently he saw them a few more times after that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the meeting with the masters from the book Inside the Spaceship was from 1955. And in reality, his world tour in 59 and then the European tour in 63, they always accompanied him wherever he traveled in order to provide a support system. And so he was truly, in reality, never outside their company. And so George sometimes downplayed things because he didn't want to seem like he knew everything, which he didn't. He never claimed that. but he also wanted to leave the window open for further work that was going to be continued by not only himself but other individuals.
Which leads me to ask you. You mentioned that these people who are known as, he called them the brothers, have contacted other people. Why have not those other people came public, and why haven't they not brought forth the message the same way George did?
Well, in George's case, he was their primary spokesperson. And they did contact others. There were a pair of twin young ladies in Norway, and there was also an individual in South Africa. And so there were other people around the planet, but George was the primary spokesperson. He was given the most information, the greatest amount of film and photographic evidence, and so on and so forth. But each one in their own countries had to go about doing a certain amount of work as well, and none of them was as well known or connected as George was, along with his connections with Desmond Leslie and Lord Mountbatten and Queen Juliana. So George was a little bit more in the forefront.
Okay, so even though they got a hold of other people, they all had a different way of bringing forth the message. He was just the primary, the one that brought it the most public.
That's correct. And some of the people that didn't come forward as much because it was more difficult in their countries under their circumstances and what have you. And then based upon the amount of success that George had on his world tours, then there was always, there were all the people in different countries that would step forward and say, yes, I've seen that, or I can support that, and so on and so forth. But George was the primary spokesperson, and they picked him for that reason.
And well, I was going to get to another question about them, but I want to talk a little bit about his world tour. Now, his world tour was mainly it was the United States and Europe. That was correct?
No, he traveled. He had a large lecture tour, as we mentioned in the book Behind the Flying Saucer Mystery, or as it was first known as Flying Saucer's Farewell. He traveled from California to New Zealand, where they had a large number of lectures, both in the North and the South Island, and a large number of sightings, both by people before he came and while he was there. He went to before the Maori royal family and visited them, and they were talking about their historical analogies of these type of crafts and these individuals as well. From there, Australia, then on to India, through I believe it was Pakistan, and into Europe, and then to England, and then centralized Europe at that time. So it was truly around the world.
So it was around the world, and he and most of the time. Did he find that the audience and the people who came to see him were receptive and curious, or did he find that he was ridiculed by people and press alike?
I would say the vast majority was extremely interested, very supportive, very fascinated with the subject. There were different, in the different countries, there are different organized media outlets and other organizations. So, for instance, the type of problems that he encountered, let's say in Switzerland, were not the same type of complications as he would have had in Australia and New Zealand. England was a little bit different because he had a number of contacts highly placed there that were in support and basically sponsoring him through there. So there were some areas where, when the media eventually caught up, then you have your organized skeptics and troublemakers, like, for instance, in Switzerland, and a little bit in the Netherlands. I heard about what happened in
Switzerland, yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any, in different countries, any superstition or religious reaction? Like, was there any religious countries that kind of reacted differently, let's say, than the U.S.?
No, not in particular. There was never any type of a clash between what we'll call our belief system and the fact that life exists universally through the cosmos, that we are a common blueprint. And as I mentioned, he traveled through India and through some of the Middle East on his way to Europe, and on all his stops he was interacted with people that helped support what he was talking about, and also had their own experiences as well. And then, of course, with his delivering of the sealed message to Pope John the 23rd, then
That's
of
what I was
course
gonna ask
that
about.
was an avenue into the Roman Catholic Church. So I would say that, like any of the very public organizations that have their own vested interests, they will use the information or promote it as they deem that they're willing to do. And that varies from country to country and belief system to belief system. But on a whole, you will find that most of the religions, you look at Buddhism, they talk about life in the cosmos, Christianity does, and so on and so forth. So I would say most of them have a core belief structure in greater intelligence than our own.
Now, back to, you mentioned about him visiting the Pope and bringing a message. Now, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer this, but it's been over 50 years. It's been over 50 years, and obviously they consider the Vatican a very important person, a very important, the Pope a very important person to bring a message to. There must have been something in that message that they really needed him to know. Are you able to answer what was in that message?
To some degree. To some degree, the message talked about the unification of the churches and the belief system on this world. At that point, you had, between the Roman Catholic and the Greek Orthodox, you still have to this day a certain amount of friction and different hierarchy and structure. And Pope John the 23rd with Vatican II was already on his way in order to heal those divisions and bring a more unified, progressive message, and more importantly, activity and actions to the people, so that they could actually see and participate in that themselves. And so part of that had to do with that, and there were some other avenues in there that dealt directly with Pope John and a certain amount of resistance that he was going to encounter within his own superstructure.
And he was very receptive to it, the Pope.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Wow,
And like I said in the book, when he went there, the Pope says to him, "There you are. I've been waiting this for quite a while." So he was aware of that beforehand.
Oh, wow. So he was
and
aware,
some
okay.
of the extraterrestrial contacts that, as we mentioned also in the earlier program, that come and work and live amongst us for a short period of time in different avenues, and one of them are sometimes in the church structure, and they don't divide between one greater than the other. But in this case, he had a certain amount of these people already within the structure of the Vatican, because obviously the arrangements were made, and they escorted him to Pope John, and so there was, of course, predetermined schedules, and you just don't walk in the back door and say, "Hello, here I am."
Well, no, of course not.
We know the protocols that are involved.
Since when George Adamski passed away, he left his message with a few trusted people, and he probably left a lot of documents and a lot of work behind. Were you able to see anything that the brothers or that they gave him, or any messages or anything that would not normally get published in the books or not normally be talked about? I mean, were you able to see anything? I'm just curious if you were able to look at anything that's not often shown publicly that they left him.
Sure. We spent the last 2 years, my family, along with other co-workers, Madeline Rotifer and some others, with George, the largest percentage of the time when he was on the East Coast, and basically when he came, we all lived together in the same house in order to facilitate all the work that needed to be done, and it was an intensely active period, and so those space contacts came to the house, and there were introductions made. And
what were they like as people when you met them?
Pardon me?
What were they like as people when you met them?
They look just the same as you and I, as far as the physical aspect is concerned. The difference is what you would be in in the bearing, the intelligence, the entire demeanor of how they present themselves and how they go about doing the work that they basically feel that they are a portion of, as far as what we call God or creative force or whatever name you want to give it. So they're going about the Father's business, and for them that's a way of life. It's not a way of lip service as we conduct it here.
Right.
And so when George had his last birthday in April, he handed my father his briefcase, and he said to him, I will be leaving this world soon, and I want you to continue the work. And so my father was horrified. He says, there's no way I could fill your shoes.
Yeah,
and he said, don't worry about it, because you have the support of the same contacts as I do, and which we did, and they in fact helped him produce my father's first book, Why Are They Here? Spaceships from Other Worlds. They basically walked him through that. And so we continued to do the work as George instructed, and of course there was information and a certain amount of things that go about that isn't widely publicly released. For instance, I mentioned George's fourth and last book, which is manuscript for version only, is Space War Inevitable. That was the space people came and directly instructed not to make that book public because it contains a lot of very detailed information of how the system is being conducted on this world, who's responsible, what forces are in play, and what have you. And they felt that would be more distracting and destructive than it would be to proceed forward with more progressive information.
Did they help him write that? I mean, that last book, did they have any hand as far as helping him?
Absolutely.
It's
George,
weird. It's just interesting they would...
You basically have to understand that since his contacts, and let's be quite blunt here, George chose a time and place to start this, and his space contacts worked with him in order to make that launch period happen. In reality, he had interactions long before the so-called official version in Desert Center in 1952.
Yeah.
But to make it simple, they were with him in most circumstances continually, and so they would have individuals that would travel with him. There are some photographs that we do not circulate out of respect for these people and also for their own personal safety, because they still walk amongst us
at
certain times. And so, in general, he needed that support to go out in front of the public in so many countries, in front of the military, in front of the intelligence communities. When he came to Washington and he lectured there to the Air Force Reserve, all the top brass were sitting in front row in uniform. And so in order to facilitate that amount of energy and concentration and continuity in message, you have to have support. No person can do that on their own, and they gave him as much as they possibly could.
Right.
So I was just curious that as he was writing that last manuscript with their help, I'm assuming it was just sort of a kind of a consensus. They said, you know what, there's a lot of stuff in here that should just not be seen by the general public. Maybe we shouldn't.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. And so we were given that instruction, and we continue to honor that instruction based upon their wishes.
Right.
It's like having your own secret, though.
Well, not really, because you can, after the last 50 years, you can, if you're somewhat astute and somewhat observant, we can see the geopolitical manipulations of how we are conducting business on this world, how we continue to micromanage progress or the lack of it. And so in reality, the principle and the method is quite clear, and it's just we always want to have specifics, the individuals and what have you, and so you have a lot of accusations about organizations that were once something and then another, like the Illuminati and things like that, and they're given much more traction than in reality they ever were or will be, because the true individuals that are working in partnership geopolitically are much deeper rooted in a core than the so-called names that we like to throw around, whether it happens to be Rothschilds or anybody else.
Yeah.
Those are just the very peripheral, given to the public as some, to satiate them a little bit in order to keep one hand doing one thing while the other one's doing something else. But the true power lies much, much deeper than that.
Without any going into detail, was there a lot of the things that were written in that book that maybe came true or are actually spot on?
Oh, absolutely. I'll say that from a majority of George's material. In fact, with the last one, Behind the Flying Saucer Mystery, the 55 pages that we added to it and the 22 pages of illustrations were basically an affirmation of the information that he talked to about and how things came to fruition. For instance, in his study course, the Science of Life study course, on one of the lessons, he tells us the fact that there is a great deal of salt water on Mars. Well, last year they released an article in which they have admitted to the same thing, and so...
I've always wanted to take that course.
Well, it's available. I'd be more than happy to
I know,
get it to you.
I know it is. I've always wanted to take it. I just may take it up one of these times.
Yeah, well, I'll be happy to give it to you. But the interesting thing about George, he is attacked so heavily for the very reason that, unlike anyone else in this field, before since, the continuity of this information, his direct access to government, military, presidents, is basically so much of the work that he did and so much of the information that was given on to him to pass along has come to fruition. And that's why he continues to be such an eyesore to the skeptics and to the critics that wish to debunk all of this field. And of course, they don't want to debunk, they don't want to go after the sci-fi stories or the monster stories or any of these other things. If you can come up with the most bizarre, horrific tale, nobody bothers you. But if you tell people about other intelligent beings, human beings that come and interact with you and work with you and show you some enlightenment and show you how you are responsible for carrying forth your own intellect and recognition, oh boy, they come after that like nobody's business.
I believe it.
And more so the people in this field than anybody else. They're the ones that wish to continue the convolution and the confusion that continues to resonate within this particular subject. While we're here for the moment, let me at least give some kind of a response, because I was listening to your audio portion there, and with this one fellow was rather distressed with his descriptions. So let us be clear, because clarity seems to be a rare commodity in this particular field, or actually in any other for that matter. With understanding and with some education and realization comes reasoning and intelligent response. So what do I mean by that? The space people who come here come to help us to understand. They help to promote our awareness, to motivate us. We're motivated into the space program. We were motivated to open up fields and biomedicine and biochemistry so we would understand how nature works and how there is a common thread to the development and progression of life and understanding. And by realizing this, or like, for instance, going to school, so to speak, we then come to the ability to understand our surrounding world. The world around us is changing both solar systemically throughout all the planets. We have our own Earth cycle as well, and there is also a certain amount of contribution that we have, what we call edging towards the tipping point. But in reality, this information and the reality of it is in front of our eyes. Mm-hmm. We can see the changes to the world. We know we will have rising in the ocean levels. We know we will have melting of caps. We know we will have changes in polarity and changes systemically in our weather patterns, which will change things on this world and can change them quite dramatically. By understanding this process and by our own ability to be in space and to view and collect data, We are therefore able to make cognizant, reasonable decisions ourselves. For example, we know there's this increased in volcanic activity, earthquake activity. So you don't slap a city down or right on the top of a major fault zone and play Russian roulette
Right.
until finally it goes ballistic, and then there's great tragedy. Is that tragedy then due to anybody else? No. It's due to our decision to choose to remain in an area which is geophysically unstable for either economics or convenience or what have you. So we are so trying to point the finger at somebody else, whether the government is holding it from us or this is doing it from us or this conspiracy and that conspiracy, but we have our own individual recognition and intellect in order to avoid dangerous zones. And if we choose not to do that, we can't blame anybody else.
Right.
So I think that ignorance is truly our greatest enemy and not anybody from any other world or place in space.
Yep, I would agree with that.
I would agree with
I'll
that
let you
too.
continue,
Yeah.
but I had to, because this is what I address when I go out and talk to the public.
Right.
I try to bring them back to a center, to a core where there is some realization and some reality to this rather than wild accusations. Hell, nothing of importance has been going on in Area 51 for decades now. They give you a little trinket of what they're playing with, but the majority of all that high technology development has moved away from that area already 30 years ago and is located in a different state. So these accusations are based on ignorance.
Very much so.
I'm sure that's used as part of the plan, too. Everybody look at Area
Absolutely,
51
both
while we
from
go
within
somewhere
and
else.
from without, because the trouble is there is so much unaccountability. People run around in this field, they make accusations, they
Oh,
make
yeah.
statements, nobody holds anybody accountable. Where's the proof? Where's some tangible facts? They don't give any. In fact, they try to step away from that as much as possible. If I watch some of the television shows that are talking about this subject at night, there is some information, piecemeal of it here and there, that it's not too bad. But most of it is pure conjecture.
Yeah.
And that's what they say. Well, if we had this, maybe it could have been that, should have been this, and coulda, woulda, shoulda, blah. And at the end of it, they don't have any
Right.
answers because they don't have any answers. So if you don't have any answers, maybe you should shut your mouth and acquire
And stop
some
making
of
things up.
A lot of it seems
Exactly.
regurgitated, too.
them. Exactly. So anyway, please continue.
No, I'm glad you stated that, because that's partly the reason why we put some of these articles in there, because I don't like to be cynical and laugh at people, but some of it is based on such ignorance, but at the same time it's good to see what people are thinking and talking about. I'd like to put in something from somebody who actually has some validity to back them up one of
Right.
these days. So, but hopefully I'll run across articles and I'll run across some of that sometime.
We'll post a Daily Mirror article here and an article from SETI over here. You know?
Right, exactly,
Maybe
exactly.
it's best put
Yeah.
it this way. Fear is a common tool.
It is.
We use that.
Yep.
We use it to control the people. We use it to control the economy, the market, geopolitics, religion. There's always going to be some terrible detrimental effect upon you if you don't fall in line or what have you. We use fear constantly. And then when you listen to some of what goes around, you find that in reality, it is part of that status quo. It's the same promotion of fear in order to get to that same spot of unreasonably or unreasoning action or thought, because that's what it leads to next, action. And so sometimes we're playing right into the very hands of the so-called powers
Right.
that would maneuver us by simply allowing ourselves to be used in that fashion. And we have
Absolutely.
to break that train of thought.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to have one last statement about the brothers and about this conclusion of this story, and then we want to start talking about you. One last statement. I think Anthony was mentioning that he was wondering.
Oh, you said they looked and acted like we do. Was there anything emotionally different about them? Like, did they have any emotional reactions that were different?
No, we are so used to science fiction that we can't tell the truth from science fiction anymore, or fantasy. Think of it this way.
Uh-huh.
Does the person that live in the jungles of Papua New Guinea or the Amazon basin feel any less love or emotion or any less connectivity to those around them than the one who is walking around in New York City or on the campus of Harvard or Cambridge? No, because with advancement comes, once again, the recognition and realization of where we can go with that. So they are much more aware of the principle of love, which we confuse with emotionalism.
Right.
And that principle is basically a force and energy which permeates energy-wise through all creation. And so they are much more cognizant because they are much more exposed. They are not hindered. Nobody gives them false information. They don't do that amongst themselves. It's just not done. It's not even considered. Nobody plays anybody out. And you can go and you can see true information. When you go to a library, you don't have to sort through books, so this may be this, maybe not, what have you, and different people's opinions and theories. They don't deal with that. They deal with the truality of reality. And that gives you such a level of understanding and exposure. We call that mastery.
Right.
Which in reality they don't believe there is mastery because there's always forward progression. It's just a word.
Yes.
But that total encompassment is something that they live every moment of their lives. It starts from the moment of birth and continues until they pass to the next form.
That would make sense. It's what we strive and what we have to work for is something that they grew up naturally and that they've I don't like to say the word mastered, but it comes natural to them because of the atmosphere and because of the environment that they grew up
Nothing
in.
is hidden. Nothing is
hidden,
confused.
right.
All right, we take the children at young age here. They have recognition and cognizance of previous lives and
They do,
existence.
yeah.
We think they're nuts. We take them to the psychologist whose job is to completely whitewash it and brainwash them because that doesn't fit into their
Well, I don't think they're nuts. I encourage them to talk about it.
That's
whenever
right.
that
And
happens.
so there's this constant subversion of things that comes natural until we are no longer natural people. And
Right.
I tried to give an address in Australia in 2006. What does it mean to be a universal person? And in a way, that's what they are. They carry that universality within them. And so when they interact with you, there is an immense understanding of where you are.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that it's total forgiveness. We have this huge misconception that in order to be advanced, you have to butter and smear it and forgive everything. And that's not the case. That's what experience and life means, so that you can correct or readjust yourself as you go along.
Yeah.
But we have such a huge amount of confusion on this world. It's very difficult. And that's why they come here, in order to try to help us through that. But they help those who wish to be helped. They don't
Right.
beat their head against the wall for people who have not reached that stage yet.
Right.
Because they're not there.
That makes logical sense, too.
Yeah. Well, if you're still in touch with the brothers, tell them to listen to this show, and especially with you as a guest.
Well, I can only say it's been my very rare privilege. It has nothing to do with me. It's through the association with George and my family who carried that through. So I can truly say that I am an observer and working to promote and to carry forth that message. So I cannot summon anyone, and neither would I want to. I'll leave I'll leave that to their greater intelligence.
I just threw it out there saying, if for any reason, if for any reason they get in touch with you, I'd love for them to listen to this show. And that leads me to our next question about you. Now we want to start talking about you. We want to ask what it was like to have a childhood like yours, where you got to witness all of this, and did it make you different from other children in school when you went to school?
Well, I would say in some ways yes, in some ways no. I think it impacted me perhaps later on in my teenage years and forward from that. But I can say that having, as a young person witness such things as a levitation or the device, which that can either be done through a mechanical means or through knowing and being able to control that principle yourself. That and the bending of light rays, which to your optical eyes makes you invisible, but you're still in the position and you're still physically there. There's no interdimensionality to do with this. There are very simple scientific mechanical explanations for some of the things they can do. The maneuvering of the ships at such high speed, you think that disappears, and it just basically is maneuvering faster than the frame rate per second that your eyes can track. So it just accelerates out of view, and you think, boom, it's gone, and it's gone. It just maneuvered, accelerated away. And coming into contact with some of these people and growing up in an environment where you were part of it, you were never excluded. I was never excluded from anything. But my upbringing was you sat there, you kept your mouth closed, and you listened and absorbed like a sponge. And so the type of environment that you see the children raised in these days where they're screaming bloody murder and you're wondering who's the parent, who's the child, was not the case in my particular upbringing.
That's true.
And so these things, of course, they're deeply rooted in my cognizance and memory and foundation upon which I've built upon. And as I've mentioned to people, I understand what it means to be skeptical or not trusting it or a bit insecure about it or what have you, because they haven't had that same exposure. I have been so very fortunate to have such a solid exposure to build upon and continue forward that I don't have to constantly look back and question, well, was that so or wasn't so? And you know, like the psychologist, well, you know, did it happen, did it not, blah, 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 blah. So in a way, I am free from that particular restraints. And so I can understand when I interact with people the very different aspects of the mind and expression and understanding from one end of the spectrum to the other. And so that has helped me a great deal. And of course, I found it easier that when you talk about yourself and your own experiences and how you come about that recognition, that helps others because they see themselves the same. My father, he was, you could consider, to be a very critical, skeptical person. The plethora of information that was literally dropped in his lap was more than he ever needed. And so it took him from someone who was in that particular mindset totally the other direction, where off he went to do the work in the business that he was instructed to do. And so you know, everybody has a little bit different sphere of environment, and so I can say that I grew up normally in some respects. I've had, when we went to Mexico, George instructed us an area that was a landing base there, so we had a piece of property down there, and the Mexican Secret Service showed up within a couple days of going there, and they went all over the property with magnetic meters and rods and things like that.
Did they find anything?
30 soldiers, military soldiers, and the chief agent that was in charge of all stood in the living room with my father and pointed to the picture of George's hanging on the wall, and he said to my father these words: "We know they are here. We know they are good for us. We don't want them." And my father says, "Don't worry, I don't have a spaceship buried here, because if I did, I'd have gotten the hell out of here a long time ago."
Yes, seriously.
So these kind of things stick in your mind.
I can imagine. And was there ever a time, I know this sounds very silly, but was there ever a time when your father had to take you aside and tell you, this is what my friend does, and he kind of had to explain to you that it was a little bit different than what people normally do, that he went on, he didn't have to do that. You just kind of saw
and
witnessed everything.
So we interacted with them. We saw the films. We saw the ships up close.
Okay.
We had
no need. Yeah.
CIA was parked down there at the end of the driveway. My father used to say to me at night, "Come on, we'll take a thermos down there."
Wow, you saw the ships up close. You are so lucky. That is so cool.
One night he takes a flashlight, flashes a preset sequence in the air in a clear sky, no clouds, and within a couple of seconds, that beam comes right back down and lights up that whole cul-de-sac, and those agents took off out of there peeling rubber,
Wow.
and we had a new set the next night. But, these things we were living in the space age.
Yes.
Mercury was there, and Apollo was coming, and Kennedy had pushed us towards that, and thank God for that. And George interacted with Kennedy on several occasions, and Eisenhower before that. And so the whole world was looking towards that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great window of opportunity that got slammed shut at the end of the 60s.
It's interesting, as the world was looking up, you guys were looking down and around.
I know, it's true. Do you have children of your own?
I can say that it's been a very unique and very humbling experience, and you take it, the best you can. And I understand people's skepticism. We're so programmed in order to believe either no existence or hostile environments. And as we talked before in an earlier program, the Moon book that we did, Alien Bases on the
Right,
Moon 2,
I was
was
going to ask
to
you
show
about
that
that.
continuity. Some of the pictures that I sent you that you uploaded were about that from the Apollo program, from when Dad and Mom went to NASA before the 22 scientists and the Colonel Freeman and the Pentagon. So I come from a period of time when this was a very real. This was not hocus pocus. This was not a fantasy. This they wanted to know, and they had a heck of enough own information of their own, and we know because we have recoveries from Roswell and Cortez and Aztec and other places, and several other places around the world. So we were exposed to the technology and have reversed it or engineered it quite well.
So, going to your father's work, Alien Bases on the Moon, he managed to get some photos that look very close up of some of what looks like the moon's surface. And it's been a long time since I read that book. I looked at the book years ago. Did he say where the source, what the source were, where the photos came from, and how, and what the source of the photography was, how they got so close?
Absolutely. The book gives all the serial numbers. This is public information. As an American public, the U.S. taxpayer is fully vetted and entitled to it. And basically what happened is after the meeting with the scientist towards the end of Gemini and into the 70s, he maintained a relationship with some of these doctors. And they said, hey, if you write to Goddard, to this particular department, you will find that there is advertising for the microfiche or the catalog for a series of these photographs, whether it comes to the Lunar Orbiter series or the Apollo program at that time. And to such a great extent, the Nixon administration and those that were working with that were working forcibly to shut down the space program. And so a lot of this material sat around in warehouses, and so you simply wrote, they sent you a catalog, it cost X amount per picture, you ordered it up or ordered the microfiche, and then you started to go through the film picture by picture and examine it, and then take that serial number and send it in, and you'd get an 11 by 15 or 11 by 12 photo, and there you are, off and running. And we managed to get, since we were one of the first to pioneer in this field, in the 70s we did the research. I think only George Leonard, somebody else is on the moon, was a year before us, and then afterwards William Bryan, Moongate. So in 81, when that book came out, we had first generation, literally copies from the originals that were sent to us, and I still have those in the vault as well. And so, all that came after, many have tried to copy the book. And the interesting thing is every time I see a program that has alien bases or moon bases or something like that, I see those pictures from our book, but they never, ever, ever mention that book or my father is the author, and it's a very simple reason that I was told, because it has the name Adamski in it.
Oh, that's not fair.
No,
that's
not
not
at all.
right.
I can only tell you what the truth of it is, and that's because once again, the correlation of what the man said and had to say, they feel is a direct opposite or a threat to what is trying to be promoted. And that new book, Behind the Flying Saucer Mystery, which is available through ABE or eBay or directly from us. I think Amazon has that as well on there. I think I finally got it on. That was a bit of difficulty, but the book is out and available again, and I try to point that out to people because there's so much innuendo and accusation against George by people who don't have the slightest clue what they're talking about.
Glenn, we were talking about George's story, about your father's story, and your story, which we feel all three are very unique in their own way. But we were wondering why there has never been a movie made about any of this, or why Hollywood or somebody who's creative has not approached you or approached George or your father about making a movie about
Or have they?
Or have they, yeah.
I actually will have a meeting on Friday to that effect in Santa Monica.
There you go.
Really? That's
So
wonderful.
we will start the process and see where that runs. There were several attempts earlier, I would say, in the 80s, and you have to understand that, I want to stay true to the story.
Right.
I think it is exciting enough without having to add the Spielberg type of dramas to it, or the sensationalism or the horror stories. Or things
That's
like
exactly
that.
the word
So
I was thinking of.
Yeah, I'm very much, shall we say, hands-on to that, and I think it can be quite well done. In fact, at one point, Jock Mahoney, who was a very good friend of George, and Jock and his wife would come quite often up to Palomar Mountain and spend time with him there, was once slated to play George in a movie, and that just didn't come around to fruition. So there were several times the ball has been bounced, and we'll see where this one goes from here.
Now, do you know if it's like aimed for like TV, or is this going to be aimed for like the actual theatrical film?
I think they're going to aim for cinema.
Wow,
Okay.
that would be great. And I hope they choose the right actors.
Well, yeah, we bounced those ideas a few times too, so we'll be, if and when we get to that point, we will definitely be very selective as far as casting and things like that. So,
Do you have anybody in mind to play like your father and George?
A few names have been thrown out there, but it's got to be availability. It has to be actors that are willing to play the part. It would be premature to kind of do that. It would be unfair as well.
That's
so
true.
I think that there still, there's a plethora of very good people out there. Should we get to that point? So we'll be, optimistically hopeful and see what comes from the meetings and how far it goes forward.
And we'll promote it on this page when it comes out,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Well, a good friend of mine, Patrick, he was working on his particular documentary. I think it was called "They Rode Flying Saucers," and I spent a lot of time with him, and he's put together, I guess the trailer is out for it, and there's a lot of work and what have you. So there's been some supportive work in this field, not only of George, but of other cases as well. And so I still think that for those who seek with a bit of intuition and a bit of reasonability and logic, that they can still find themselves a good amount of information. It's kind of thought-provoking in a way, because we have such a fear of losing our lives in natural disasters or manipulations or conspiracies and things like that, that we really overlook nurturing our own souls. And that is really what these type of space visitors come here, that to give us that recognition and allow us that openness in order to take the next step forward. And I think traditionally throughout the history of this world and this solar system and most likely this cosmos, that has been a unified effort for as long as there are such things as people and records as well. And so I give them a huge amount of credit and a great deal of trust and faith, and they have always proven very up to the task.
Well, I think
out of time.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time now, and I think we've pretty much have covered a lot of stuff. I know that there's probably more stuff we could always think of. We could be here for another half an hour or another hour, because I mean, I know there's definitely more we want to ask you, because we were discussing a lot of subjects on the break, but we're going to have to go ahead and cut it short for right now for the next, because I guess it's the last break of the show.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know that I'm more than happy to come back on with you anytime, and and we can diversify, as much as you wish into other tangents if you like. So I'm available based upon my schedule, and more than happy to do the very best I can to try to
thank you.
Give the best amount of information and accuracy that I possibly can, and if I don't know it, I'm not going to make it up. That's for sure.
And anything you want to share,
I'm glad.
Anything you want to share, feel free to post on our page anytime.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, is there anything you want to
please.
plug, your website or anything coming up?
Well, I have you guys here today. There's a couple of more shows that suddenly, so it's either, it's all at one time, so I've got some other engagements here for later on this month. One of them is about 4 or 5 hours one evening, so
Wow.
I've done that before, and several others as well. So, but if people want, they can just throw my name into Google, and they'll get more than they bargained
Lots of
for.
stuff comes up.
And the website as well?
Yeah, Adamski it's basically Adamski Foundation, oneword.com, and even though it's an old website, we continue to work as volunteers to slowly bring more information and things on there. And so I think that for those seeking, there's certainly a great deal of thought-provoking information available for them there, and they can always contact me through that as well.
I'm going to go ahead and put that link in, and I got to go there and order that Science of Life course.
Well, you don't have to worry about ordering it. Just tell me where you want it sent, and I will take care of it when I get back from flying here.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Excellent.
Alrighty.
Well, thanks again, Glenn, for being on, and we'll definitely would love to have you back.
You bet. Well, Tony and Verna, thank you so much for enlightening people and giving an avenue for them to listen to this subject and to give them reason to think and to improve themselves, and that's the best we can hope for, and help each other out as much as possible.
Excellent.
Yes,
Absolutely.
definitely.
All righty. Well, anytime, let me know, and we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Glenn.
Have a good night, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All righty. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
So that concludes
that was Glenn
our
Steckling part 2 interview, which I don't know how
turned
many
out
parts.
wonderful. Yep.
That was great.
Yeah, hope to have him on again one of these days.
Every time we go to a break, I'm like, I want to ask this and this and this.
I know.
and this.
We had so many questions for him.
There's just a lot of information. It's just fascinating to listen to, different angles of
Different
the information.
angles for somebody who has an insider's knowledge about this whole thing. Yeah.
Direct knowledge. That's awesome.
Right.
All right, folks. That ends another episode of Ecto Portal. So we're going to sign off here.
Okay, we'll see you all next week.